The meeting had already started by the time Julian Brooks found a seat near the back. He had been at Solvane Industries long enough to know what these all-hands announcements meant. Someone in a tailored suit was about to walk out and explain why everything was about to change. He had his coffee. He had his skepticism. He was ready. He was not ready for her. Celeste Rowan stepped onto the stage in a charcoal blazer, her posture unhurried, her expression composed, and Julian stopped breathing, because he knew that face. 2 nights ago, he had sat across a dinner table from that face and told her in exact, unfiltered words that the new CEO coming into Solvane was exactly the kind of cold-blooded executive who saw workers as line items. He had called her heartless. He had said she deserved whatever backlash was coming. Celeste had listened to every word without blinking. Now she stood at the front of the room, microphone in hand, and her eyes found him in the crowd just for a second. Not angry, not surprised, like she had already decided what came next. If you're new here, this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. Real, honest, and never simple. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and let's get back to Julian and Celeste. Julian Brooks had been doing this alone for 8 years, and he had gotten good at it. He knew which grocery store had the shortest lines on Sunday mornings. He knew that Maya needed 30 minutes of quiet after school before she could talk about her day. He knew how to make her laugh when she was pretending she wasn't upset, and he knew when to leave her alone entirely. He had learned all of it by trial and error with no handbook and no backup, and most days he considered that enough. Most days it actually was. His wife had left on a Tuesday. No argument, no build-up, just a letter on the kitchen counter, and a daughter asleep down the hall who didn't yet know her mother had already made her choice. Julian had read the letter twice, folded it, and put it in a drawer he never opened again. He did not let himself fall apart until Maya was at school. He did not let himself fall apart for long after that either, because there was no one to hand things off to while he did. What that experience left behind wasn't rage, it was a reflex, the quiet, automatic assumption that everyone given the right circumstances and the right opportunity would eventually choose to walk out. He didn't announce this belief, he didn't dwell on it, he simply built his life around it, keeping enough distance from anyone new that if they left, the structural damage would be manageable. At Solvane Industries, Julian ran the engineering floor with the kind of low-key authority that came from actually knowing what he was talking about. He wasn't the kind of manager who wanted a bigger office. He wanted his team to have what they needed. He wanted the machines to run correctly, and he wanted to be home by 6. His colleagues trusted him because he never told them what they wanted to hear. The workers on the line trusted him because he showed up when things broke and didn't disappear when things got complicated. He dated occasionally. He was honest about it in the way that people who have been badly hurt are sometimes brutally honest, almost as a warning. He told every woman he went out with that he wasn't looking for anything serious, that his daughter came first always, that he wasn't going to introduce anyone to Maya, and that if that was a problem, they should figure it out early. Most women respected it. A few tried to change it. None of them did. Celeste Rowan came to Solvane by way of the board of directors, 3 rounds of closed-door negotiations, and a performance record that made her the most qualified candidate on a short list that had already been heavily filtered. She had spent her career turning around companies that didn't know they were in trouble until the numbers were already ugly. She was good at reading data. She was faster at making decisions than most people were at identifying the problem. She had lived in 4 cities in the last decade and had not once unpacked every box before the next assignment began. Her closest friend, Nor Randall Bennett, had known her for 15 years, long enough to recognize when Celeste was performing composure and when she actually had it. Nora was the only person Celeste called when something was genuinely wrong, and the only person who called her out without softening at first. Before leaving for her new role, Celeste had told Nora everything: the job, the city, and the man she had met and wasn't sure what to do about. Before she officially took the role at Solvane, Celeste gave herself 5 days. No meetings, no email, no title. She checked into a hotel under her own name and moved through the city like a person who didn't have anywhere to be, because for the first time in years, she didn't. She met Julian at a Tuesday night jazz set in a bar that smelled like old wood and good bourbon. He was sitting alone at a corner table with a drink he was barely touching, watching the band with the focused attention of someone who had come specifically for the music. She sat 2 tables away. By the end of the first set, they were at the same table. By the end of the night, she had laughed more than she had in months. She told him she was a management consultant who had just relocated. He didn't press for more. She noticed he didn't press for more, and she appreciated it in a way she didn't fully examine at the time. Julian told her exactly what he always told women he found himself wanting to spend more time with, that he wasn't looking for a love story, that his life had a shape that worked, and he wasn't interested in complicating it, and that if she was fine with that, he was fine with company. Celeste said she was fine with that. She meant it when she said it. She was somewhat less certain by the 3rd time they met when she caught herself rearranging her schedule to make sure she was free. They met 3 times over the course of 10 days. He made her laugh. She made him talk about things he usually didn't talk, about his daughter, his work, the particular exhaustion of caring about people who hadn't asked you to. He did not feel pitied. She did not feel managed. For 2 people who were both very practiced at holding the world at a careful distance, it was an unsettling amount of ease. What Julian did not know was that Celeste had already signed her contract with Solvane. What he also did not know, and what Celeste had told herself would matter less and less as the days passed, was that she had known he worked there since the night before their second meeting, when a mutual contact had mentioned his name. She had told herself she would bring it up. She kept not bringing it up. By the 3rd meeting, she had run out of good reasons and was operating on reasons she wasn't proud of. She didn't want it to end yet. The news about the layoffs broke on a Thursday. A business reporter had gotten hold of a preliminary memo and published a story about Solvane's incoming leadership, considering the closure of 2 manufacturing facilities and the elimination of several hundred positions. The article didn't name the new CEO. It didn't need to. Everyone at Solvane knew the announcement was coming within days, and everyone had been quietly doing the math on whether their job was in the column that stayed or the column that went. Julian read the article at his desk and felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with his own job security. He thought about the guys on the line who had been at Solvane longer than he had. He thought about Dennis on the floor, who had mentioned just last week that he was 18 months from retirement and couldn't afford a gap in his pension. He thought about the fact that somewhere above all of them, a person who had never met any of them was looking at a spreadsheet and deciding their futures. That night he wrote a post. It wasn't calculated or particularly polished. It was the kind of thing you write when you are genuinely angry and you know enough about a subject to be specific. He laid out exactly how the cuts would affect not just the workers, but the operational structure of the facilities, and he made the argument that the incoming leadership was choosing the fastest solution over the right one. He posted it at 11 at night and went to bed. By morning, it had been shared by nearly 3,000 people, most of them Solvane employees. He met Celeste for dinner that same evening. He pulled up the post on his phone and showed it to her across the table, partly because he was proud of it, and partly because he wanted to say out loud what he'd been saying in his head all week. He told her that whoever was stepping into that CEO role had better be prepared to actually walk the floor before they started cutting it apart. He said that the kind of executive who made decisions like this from behind a closed office door was exactly the kind of leader who had no business running anything that involved real people. He said the word heartless, and he meant it. Celeste looked at the post. She read it carefully. Then she set his phone down on the table between them and said nothing for a long moment, and he thought she was just thinking it through the way she sometimes paused before she responded. He didn't know she was sitting with the specific weight of having initialed a preliminary reduction plan 3 weeks earlier, a plan she had already started to have doubts about, but had not yet had the courage to formally revisit. She didn't tell him that night. She told herself she would figure out how to handle it in the morning. In the morning, Julian walked into the Solvane all-hands meeting and stood in the back of the room with his coffee, and Celeste Rowan stepped onto the stage. The meeting ended. Julian didn't move for a moment after the room started clearing. Then he walked directly to the hallway, stood next to a window, and stared at the parking lot without seeing it. His coffee had gone cold. By noon, his phone showed a message from an internal extension he didn't recognize. Celeste's assistant. The new CEO would like to meet with him at 2 o'clock if he was available. The phrasing made it clear that available was not really the operative question. He went. Her office still had the impersonal quality of a room that had been used by someone else until recently. She was standing when he came in, which he registered as a small thing that was probably not a small thing. Julian spoke first. He said he wanted to be clear that he had not known, and that if she had told him at any point during the past 10 days, the conversation would have gone differently. Celeste said she knew that. She said she hadn't known he worked at Solvane when they first met, which was true. She said that she had found out before the third time they saw each other, and that she had chosen not to say anything, and that she was not going to pretend that choice had been the right one. He asked her why. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that the conversations they'd had were the only ones in recent memory where she had been able to speak without a title in the room, and that she hadn't been ready to give that up. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said that was honest, at least. She offered him a seat on the Operational Review Committee, a small team that would spend the next several weeks evaluating the facilities before any final decisions were made. She was specific she wasn't offering it because of their personal situation, which she understood he had good reason to want distance from. She was offering it because he understood the systems better than anyone else who had spoken to her since she'd arrived, and because he had said publicly what no one else had been willing to say to her face. Julian thought about it in the silence that followed. He thought about his colleagues and about the post and about the fact that the most direct route to protecting the people he worked with was standing in front of him in a charcoal blazer, offering him a seat at the table. He said yes. On 2 conditions: his input would be documented and attributed, and whatever had existed between them personally would be put aside until the review was complete. Celeste said those terms were acceptable. Neither of them said what both of them understood, that put aside was not the same as gone, and that working this closely with someone you had been trying very hard not to feel serious about was going to require more discipline than either of them had demonstrated so far. The first week of the operational review was professional and uncomfortable in approximately equal measure. Julian came prepared to every meeting. He brought floor-level data that the previous reports had either missed or smoothed over maintenance cycles, output variance, the quiet ways that understaffing had been absorbed by the people on the line rather than reflected in the official numbers. Celeste read everything he submitted. She asked follow-up questions that told him she had actually read it, not just flagged it for someone else to summarize. He respected that, grudgingly, and tried not to let the grudging part show too much. The tension between them was managed mostly. They were careful with each other in the way that people are careful when they know exactly where the fragile points are. It broke on a Wednesday afternoon. Celeste had made a call about one of the secondary assembly lines, a scheduling adjustment that would reduce idle time and improve throughput. It was a reasonable call on paper. She made it without looping in Julian first, and he found out about it when one of his team leads mentioned it in passing during a floor walkthrough. He walked into the afternoon review meeting and waited until there was a natural pause. Then he laid it out calmly and specifically in front of the 6 other people in the room. The adjustment she had approved would create a bottleneck at the packaging stage that the efficiency numbers wouldn't capture until the 3rd week, at which point it would look like a worker performance issue rather than a structural one. He explained the downstream effect. He explained why it mattered. And then, because he was still carrying 10 days of compressed anger and a full week of professional restraint, he said that if the goal was to stop making decisions without understanding what they affected, this was not a strong start. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when someone has said a true thing badly. Celeste held his gaze across the table. She did not get defensive. She said he was right about the bottleneck and that the scheduling change would be paused pending a revised assessment. Then she adjourned the meeting 20 minutes early. She found him in the hallway afterward. She said, keeping her voice even, that he was correct about the process failure and that she would own it. Then she said something else. She said that there was a difference between raising a legitimate concern and using a legitimate concern to make a point in front of an audience, and that if he had a problem with a decision she'd made, he was capable of telling her directly. Julian started to answer. She didn't let him. She said, "I'm not asking you to forgive me for what I didn't tell you. I'm asking you to decide whether you're here to help fix this or to make sure I know I was wrong. Because I already know I was wrong. What I need to know is which one you're actually doing." Julian was quiet for a moment. Outside, someone was moving equipment across the loading dock. The sound filled the hallway and then faded. He said, "Both. I've been doing both." Celeste nodded once, like that was the honest answer she had been waiting for. She walked back toward her office. Julian stood in the hallway a moment longer and then went back to the floor. Something shifted after that. Not resolved, shifted. They stopped moving around each other quite so carefully and started actually disagreeing, which turned out to be more productive than the careful version had been. Julian pushed back on projections he thought were optimistic. Celeste pushed back on timelines she thought were conservative. They were both right about some of it and wrong about the rest, and the work was better for the friction. At home, Maya had noticed. She didn't say much. Maya rarely led with what she was actually thinking, but Julian caught her looking at him a certain way at dinner one night, the way she looked when she was assembling information. He asked her what was on her mind. She said nothing, finished her food, and went to do homework. 2 nights later, she asked without preamble whether the new CEO was someone he knew personally. Julian told her it was complicated. Maya said that meant yes. He told her the broad version. They had met before the announcement, he hadn't known who she was, and now they were working together on the review committee. He kept it factual. Maya listened without interrupting, which was how she listened when something mattered to her more than she wanted to show. She said, "Is she the reason you've been in a bad mood for 2 weeks? Or is she the reason you've been in a weirdly okay mood for 2 weeks?" Julian told her to go finish her homework. Maya went. But she watched him more carefully after that. The solution came together in the 4th week. Julian had been running numbers on a phased equipment modernization plan, restructuring 2 of the production lines rather than eliminating them, which allowed the labor cost reduction Celeste needed without the workforce reduction her original plan had required. It wasn't a simple fix. It required capital expenditure the board had not initially approved and a renegotiation of vendor contracts that would take time. But the math worked, and more importantly, the operational logic worked, and Julian had spent 3 days making sure he could defend every part of it before he brought it to Celeste. She spent 40 minutes reading it in silence while he sat across from her. Then she looked up and said she needed the afternoon to go through the vendor contracts. She would have a response by end of day. By 5 o'clock, she had approved the plan. By the following morning, she had requested an emergency board meeting to present the revised strategy. The board approved it with modifications. The facility closures were taken off the table. The all-hands meeting to announce the outcome was held on a Friday morning. Celeste stood at the front of the same room where Julian had stood weeks earlier, watching her step onto a stage and rearrange everything he thought he knew. This time, he was in the 3rd row. She presented the revised plan clearly and without drama. Then, near the end, she said, "I came into this company looking at what the numbers said needed to happen. Julian Brooks made me look at what the numbers were failing to account for the people behind them. This plan exists because he was willing to say what was true instead of what was comfortable." Several hundred people in the room turned toward where Julian was sitting. He looked at his hands for a moment, then back at the stage. After the meeting, he found her on the roof of the building, a maintenance access area she had apparently discovered during her first week and claimed as a place to think. She was leaning against the railing, jacket folded over her arm, looking out over the loading docks below. He stood beside her and said that he had misjudged her. She said she had given him reasonable cause to. The apology that followed was not a speech. It was the kind of short, specific exchange that happens between people who are both tired of being careful. She said she was sorry for the deception, for letting the third dinner happen without telling him the truth, for using what he'd said to her privately to inform decisions she hadn't credited him for. He said he was sorry for making her the target of 8 years of built-up skepticism toward people who held power over people he cared about. Neither of them tried to minimize what the other had said. They were standing close enough that the decision when it came didn't feel like a decision. He looked at her. She looked back. Whatever they had been holding back for the past 4 weeks was no longer being held. He asked her if she wanted to have dinner, not a work dinner, and not the careful kind they'd had when they were both pretending this was something smaller than it was. She said yes. The dinner at Julian's house was Maya's version of an interview conducted under the cover of a normal meal. She was polite. She set the table without being asked and offered Celeste water before she offered it to her father, which Julian recognized as Maya operating on her best behavior, which meant she was paying extremely close attention to everything. She asked Celeste questions about her work in a way that was genuinely curious, but also precisely designed to understand how long Celeste planned to stay in town. Celeste answered directly without talking down and without trying to perform warmth she hadn't earned yet. After dinner, while Julian was cleaning up, Maya sat across from Celeste at the kitchen table and asked her without softening it, "Are you serious about my dad?" Celeste met her eyes and said, "I don't know exactly what the future looks like yet, but I won't lie to you." Maya considered this for a moment. Then she said that her mom used to say things like that too. Not the lying part, but the part about not knowing what the future looked like. And then one day there was a letter on the counter. Celeste didn't try to talk her out of it. She just said, "That's a fair thing to be afraid of." Maya didn't respond right away, but when Celeste offered to help her identify a better lens for the photography project she'd mentioned at dinner, Maya slid her camera across the table slowly, like she was still deciding whether it was a good idea. They spent 20 minutes talking about focal length and light, and Maya answered in full sentences instead of single words, which was as much as she was willing to give that night. It wasn't trust. It was a crack in the door, and Maya intended to keep the rest of it firmly shut until she had more reason to open it. The weeks that followed had a rhythm to them that felt unfamiliar to Julian, in the specific way that good things feel unfamiliar when you haven't had them in a long time. He wanted more of it. That was the problem, not the wanting, but the shape of what he wanted. He began to notice when Celeste wasn't there. He found himself building her into plans before he'd asked if she wanted to be in them. A Saturday at the farmer's market, a family dinner on Thursday, the afternoon of Maya's first photography showcase. He didn't announce these expectations. He just held them quietly and watched to see if she would show up. Celeste tried. She was at the farmer's market. She made the Thursday dinner, though she arrived 40 minutes late, and spent part of it managing a vendor issue on her phone. She told Julian the showcase date was on her calendar. She missed it. Not carelessly, a cross-functional crisis had escalated at the worst possible moment, and she was on calls until well past when she would have needed to leave. She sent Maya a message explaining. Maya read it, put her phone face down on the table, and spent the rest of the showcase taking pictures alone. That night, after the showcase, Maya said to Julian, "I knew she wasn't going to come. People like her always have something more important." Julian called Celeste the following evening. He wasn't shouting he was worse than shouting. He was quiet in the way that meant he had thought this through. He told her she had made a promise to his daughter. Celeste said she had not promised. She had said she intended to be there. The situation had been out of her control, and she had reached out to Maya the moment she knew she couldn't make it. Julian said it didn't matter. Maya had expected her. That was the same thing. Celeste felt something firm up inside her. She said carefully, "I am trying. I'm trying in the way that I know how to try, which is not the same as the way you've decided I should. I haven't agreed to become someone I don't know how to be yet just because we're doing this." Julian said he was not asking her to be anyone she wasn't. He was asking her not to walk into his daughter's life and treat it like a secondary commitment. Celeste said, "I'm not treating it as secondary. I'm treating it as something I'm learning." Julian said, "There's a difference between learning and keeping an exit ready." The silence on the line stretched out. Then Celeste said quietly and with absolute precision, "You're not talking to me right now. You're talking to your ex-wife." Julian had no answer for that. He said nothing for long enough that Celeste understood he wasn't going to. She told him she needed to think. He said fine. They hung up. 3 days later, Julian stopped by Celeste's office to drop off a revised vendor summary work neutral, the kind of exchange they could both navigate without touching anything personal. Her desk was partially covered in documents. What stopped him was a folder sitting open on top. Solvane letterhead, visible a subject line he caught in 2 seconds before he looked away. International Division Interim Director Placement 1 year. He left the summary on the edge of the desk and walked out without saying anything. By the time he got to his car, the familiar structure had already assembled itself in his chest, the same one that had gone up 8 years ago when he'd found a letter on a kitchen counter. Someone had been making plans. Someone had not said a word. He had been here before, and he knew exactly how it ended. That night he went to her apartment. He did not lead with the folder. He said instead that he needed to know whether she was planning to leave. Just that flat direct the way he asked questions when he already believed he knew the answer. Celeste said she hadn't decided anything yet. He said the folder on her desk suggested otherwise. She closed her eyes briefly. Then she explained that she had received the offer and had not told him because she had not yet figured out what she wanted to do, and that she needed to think through a decision that size before she could talk about it, and that this was how she had always operated. Julian said, "That's exactly the problem." He told her that he had watched someone walk out of his life without a single warning, and that he was not going to stand in a relationship where plans were made in private and announced after the fact. He said he understood that she was independent, that she had built her life that way, that she was good at it, but that if she was going to be part of his family, she could not keep making decisions alone and asking him to adjust to the outcome. Celeste said, "You want me to prove I'll stay, but you've had one foot out the door since the night we met. You've been waiting for me to give you a reason to confirm what you already decided about me." Julian said that maybe they had made a mistake trying to turn what they had into something it wasn't built to be. Celeste looked at him for a long moment. Then she took the key to his house off her keychain, set it on the table between them, and left without slamming the door. She didn't slam it because she didn't want to give the moment more weight than she could afford to give it right now. Maya had been in the hallway. She had heard most of it. She sat down on the floor with her back against the wall and stayed there for a while. She had spent weeks looking for proof that Celeste would eventually leave. Now that it had happened, she didn't feel like she'd been right. She felt like she had helped make it happen. Celeste accepted the international assignment the following morning. She was scheduled to leave in 9 days. Julian did not call. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been before Celeste, or rather, in a way Julian hadn't noticed before her. He noticed it now. He went back to the routines that had always worked. He made breakfast, he drove Maya to school, he ran his floor meetings and reviewed his reports and answered his emails, and he did all of it competently, because competence had never been the part of his life that required effort. The functional parts of his days ran fine. It was the other hours, dinner evenings, the 40 minutes after Maya went to bed, that had a texture they hadn't had before and didn't have now, and he couldn't unfeel it no matter how much he told himself he had made the right call. He did not call Celeste. He told himself this was because he had said what needed to be said. He told himself she had made her choice and he had made his, and that the clarity, however painful, was better than the alternative. He had been through worse. He knew how to absorb a loss and keep moving. He had a daughter who needed him to keep moving. Maya, for her part, said almost nothing for the first 4 days. She ate dinner. She did her homework. She answered his questions with enough words to technically constitute an answer and not one word more. On the 5th day, she sat down across from him at the kitchen table after dinner and put her phone face down, which meant she had decided to say something she had been rehearsing. She told him about the camera. She said that Celeste had sent it the morning of the photography showcase, not a generic gift, but the specific model Maya had mentioned once in passing at the dinner table 4 weeks earlier. With it was a letter. Not a text message, not an email, a handwritten letter explaining that her return flight had been canceled due to weather, that she had tried 3 separate airlines, and that she was sorry, in a way that was specific enough that Maya had been able to tell she actually meant it. Julian set down his fork. Maya said, "She didn't forget, Dad. She just didn't make it." He asked why Maya hadn't told him this earlier. Maya said because she hadn't been sure it mattered, and then she had decided it did, and then she had been waiting for a moment when he looked like someone capable of hearing it. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he asked whether there was anything else. Maya said yes. She said that a few days before Celeste had left, she had asked Maya quietly, between just the two of them, whether Julian had ever talked about being open to relocating, even temporarily, not permanently, not as a demand, as a question. She had been thinking about whether there was a version of the next year that didn't require anyone to disappear. Julian pushed back from the table slightly. He looked at the wall for a moment. He said, "She was trying to find a way to keep everyone." Maya said, "Yeah, while you were busy deciding she was already gone." She said it without cruelty, the way you say a true thing to someone you love when you've run out of gentler ways to say it. She picked up her phone and went to her room, and Julian sat at the table alone. He thought about the folder on the desk. He thought about the story he had built in the space between seeing it and asking her about it, the verdict he had already reached before she said a single word. He thought about what she had said before she left. "You've been waiting for me to give you a reason to confirm what you already decided about me." He had told himself she was deflecting, but deflecting and being right were not the same thing. Sitting at his kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a quiet house, he understood clearly, finally, that he had never fully let himself be in the relationship. He had stayed close enough to feel it, and far enough to have a clean explanation if it collapsed. He had demanded proof that she would stay, while making sure there was always a door behind him. That wasn't love, that was insurance. He picked up his phone. Months ago, after a dinner where Celeste had laughed about the two of them being equally bad at asking for help, she had added Nora's number to his contacts and said, half joking, entirely serious, that if he ever needed to reach her and she wasn't picking up, Nora always knew where she was. He had never used it. He used it now. Nora answered on the second ring and told him before he could ask that Celeste's flight was in the morning. Celeste was on her second cup of coffee at the departure terminal when Nora sat down next to her and said nothing, which meant Nora had something to say and was deciding how to start. Eventually, Nora said, "You're doing the thing." Celeste said she didn't know what thing Nora was referring to. Nora said, "The thing where you decide the situation is unworkable and you leave before anyone can ask you to stay, so it feels like a choice instead of a loss." Celeste looked at her departure gate. A ground crew member was moving luggage carts in slow, deliberate arcs below the window. She watched this for a moment. She said she had not decided the situation was unworkable. She said the situation had, in fact, not worked, and that there was a difference. Nora asked her whether she would have taken the international assignment if she had never met Julian. Celeste said yes, eventually. Nora asked whether she had taken it when she did because it was the right time professionally or because it was a clean exit from something that had stopped feeling safe. Celeste did not answer immediately. She said, "I love him. I love both of them. And I'm tired of being measured against a standard that keeps shifting. Every time I got something right, the expectation moved." Nora said, "Did you ever tell him that? Not in the middle of an argument, just plainly?" Celeste started to say yes, then she stopped. She had said versions of it during fights. She had never said it the way she was saying it now, without defense, as a simple, true thing she needed him to understand. She looked at the gate again. Boarding hadn't started yet. Nora said she wasn't telling her what to do. She was just noting that Celeste had spent 9 days not calling him either, and that two people who were both very good at self-sufficiency could hold an impasse indefinitely without anyone technically being in the wrong. Celeste was about to respond when she saw them. Julian and Maya came through the main terminal entrance at a pace that was not quite running purposeful, like people who had decided something and were not slowing down to reconsider. Maya had her camera bag over one shoulder. Julian was scanning the terminal, and when his eyes found her, he slowed to a walk. Celeste stood up. They reached her, and nobody said anything for a moment. Maya looked at the departures board, then at her shoes, then at Celeste, and then she stepped forward and handed Celeste the envelope she had been carrying. Celeste opened it. Inside was a photograph, the two of them at the kitchen table, the night of the first dinner, Maya's camera catching an angle Celeste hadn't known was being photographed. They were both looking at something off-frame, and they were both, without having planned it, smiling. Maya said, "I took it that night. I was going to throw it away." Celeste looked at the photograph for a long moment. She said, "I'm glad you didn't." Maya nodded. She took a few steps back, giving them space, and found a seat nearby that was just out of earshot. She pulled out her camera and pointed it at the window, which was Maya's way of being present while pretending to be elsewhere. Julian sat down in the seat Nora had vacated. Celeste sat down next to him. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the middle distance for a moment, the way he looked when he was making sure he said something correctly. He said, "I owe you an actual apology. Not the kind where I explain why I reacted the way I did, just the apology." He said he had seen the folder and built a verdict before she had the chance to say a word. He said he had stood in her apartment and accused her of being someone she wasn't, and when she had explained herself honestly, he had used the explanation as more evidence against her. He said he had spent so long protecting himself that he had eventually turned that protection into something he aimed at her. He said, "I kept asking you to prove you weren't going to leave. I never once asked myself whether I was actually in this or just close enough to feel it and far enough to walk away with a story about why it failed. That's not fair to ask someone to love." Celeste listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "I made it easy to doubt me. I kept things to myself until I had answers, which meant you were always finding out about decisions I'd already half made. I told myself that was just how I operated. It was also a way of never being wrong in front of someone before I was ready." Julian said, "So what do we do?" It wasn't quite a question. Celeste said she was still going to go, not because she was leaving them, because this was something she had worked toward for a long time, and she was not willing to define her commitment to them by giving it up. But she wanted to go differently than she had been planning to go. She didn't want to board that plane as someone who had closed the door. Julian said, "I'm not asking you to stay." She looked at him. He said, "I'm asking if we can figure out the year, together, not me asking you to give something up and not you deciding everything alone first. Actually figure it out and then hold to what we decide." Celeste said, "I can do that." He said he could bring Maya to visit during school breaks. He said he understood the time difference would be difficult and that not every call would happen at the right moment, but that he was willing to be in it instead of waiting for it to fail. That was what he was offering, not a guarantee, but a genuine attempt, rather than a managed distance. Celeste said, "That's all I ever needed to hear." Across the terminal, Maya was not pointing her camera at the window anymore. The year was not simple. Some calls got dropped and took days to reschedule. Some weeks the time difference made real conversation nearly impossible, and both of them sent messages into the gap and waited. There were stretches when Julian's old instincts surfaced, a silence running longer than usual would pull him toward the familiar posture of bracing for loss. He texted her instead of building a case. She called back within the hour, explained she had been in back-to-back meetings with her phone on silent, and said she was sorry she hadn't sent a message first. Small corrections, made out loud each time instead of accumulated in silence. Maya flew out for 10 days in the spring. She spent the first 2 being politely reserved, and the remaining 8 being entirely herself, which Celeste later told Julian was the best 10 days she'd had in years. Maya came home with 400 photographs, and a new understanding of how Celeste moved through the world efficiently, yes, but also with a dry humor that only surfaced once she stopped performing composure, and a genuine curiosity about people she didn't always show in professional settings. Maya told her father upon returning, "She's not who you think she is in a meeting. She's better." Julian said he knew. Maya said, "I know you know. I'm telling you so you know that I know." Celeste came home in November, 11 months after she had boarded that flight, with a single suitcase and the practiced expression of someone who had gotten good at departures. She came back with the same suitcase, and for the first time she could remember a specific feeling about the place she was landing. She did not move into Julian's house. They had agreed on that not as a limitation, but as a deliberate pace, because they had both learned the cost of moving faster than the foundation could support. She got an apartment 20 minutes away. Julian helped her carry boxes. Maya came along and spent most of the time rearranging Celeste's bookshelves into an order she considered more logical, which Celeste allowed because it was the most domestic Maya had ever been in her space, and that meant something. Solvane organized a community showcase the following spring, a public exhibition of photographs documenting the lives of the people who worked in the facilities that had 14 months earlier been scheduled for closure. It was Maya's project from start to finish. She had spent months visiting the workers, learning their names, asking to photograph not their jobs but their lives, birthday parties and backyards and Sunday mornings and kids doing homework at kitchen tables. The final photograph in the exhibition was not one Maya had planned. It was one Nora had taken without announcing it on the evening Maya was hanging the show. Julian and Celeste standing together in the middle of the main floor, surrounded by the printed photographs of other people's families, talking about something that had made them both laugh. They were not looking at the camera. They were not performing anything. Maya had chosen it for the closing panel without asking either of them. The caption she wrote beneath it read, "A family isn't the people who never leave, it's the people who keep finding their way back." After the showcase, Julian took Celeste to the bar where they had first sat at separate tables on a Tuesday night and ended up at the same one by the end of the first set. The same band was playing, the same smell of old wood and good bourbon. Celeste sat down and looked around and said it was strange how small it seemed now. Julian said most things seemed smaller once you knew how they ended. She said, "Is that how you think of it, how it ends?" He said, "No, it's how I think of where we started." He reached into his jacket pocket and set a ring box on the table between them. He did not open it. He did not move from his chair. He said, "The first time we sat here, I told you I wasn't looking for a love story. I meant it. I was also wrong." He looked at the box, then at her. "This belongs to both of us." Celeste looked at the box for a moment. Then she looked past Julian's shoulder to where Maya was sitting at a table near the back camera, in hand, trying and failing to look like she was photographing the band. Maya met her eyes. She gave a single small nod, not permission, more like confirmation, like someone who had done the math a long time ago and was finally ready to say the answer out loud. Celeste turned back to Julian. She said, "Yes." Then she picked up the box, took the ring out herself, and set it on the table in front of him. She said, "Stand up." He looked at her. She said, "I'm not letting you kneel alone." Julian stood. She took his hand. They slipped the ring on together, standing at the same level in a bar where nobody knew them, except the one person at the back table who had decided somewhere between a missed showcase and a spring visit and a photograph she almost threw away that this was the family she wanted. The band played on. Maya lowered her camera and let the moment be a moment, and for once nobody was keeping a door open behind them. What Julian and Celeste had to learn slowly, painfully, and honestly is that love doesn't ask you to become someone smaller to prove you're committed. It asks you to stop protecting yourself long enough to let someone actually in. The real risk isn't being left, it's staying so guarded that you never give anyone the chance to stay. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, we'll be back with another story just like this one. We'll see you next time.